Hello, Internet. Today we're going to make a 3 by 3 grid in Photoshop. This is a beginner project that I have my students do for their very first homework assignment. We are going to start with the document setup in Photoshop. So we're going to go to New File, and then on the right, we are going to type in our units. There are some presets that might be useful to us like later on in our Photoshop career, but as very beginners, we're going to type in, well, we have to change the units to inches. 9 pixels would not be very big at all. We're going to change the units to inches, 9 inches by 9 inches. And then we are building at print resolution, so we're going to change the resolution to 300 pixels per inch. That's like how many pixels there are per inch, how fine the resolution is. Print resolution is 300 pixels per inch. Anything lower than that looks blurry, and you'll be sad if you go to print it out. So we can hit create. We're set up here with our documents. We're going to create guides to fill out our grid. We could create those manually with our rulers. If your rulers aren't on, they would be under View, Rulers. You just check off rulers and they would go on or off. And right now mine are in pixels, which can be kind of intimidating. So if you want to change it, if you're on a PC, you go to Edit, Preferences, Units and Rulers, or if you're on a Mac, you choose like the Photoshop drop down menu in the top left and choose Preferences, Units and Rulers, and we can change the units to um, inches or whatever you want. And so then we could manually drag out the guides. That's fine. Or we can create a new guide layout. So under View, Guides, New Guide Layout, we have a menu that popped up. It popped up off screen for me. We have a menu that popped up where we can choose the number of columns and the number of rows. You may have to turn like rows on and off depending. So we can tell it we want 3 columns and 3 rows, and then it's up to you what you want, if you want margins or not, and what you want the gutter to be, the gutter being the space in between. So let's make everything 1/8 inch, which is 0.125 inches, 0.125, and then I'm also going to type that into the margins. So it'll just be the same all the way around. You aren't required to have a gutter at all. I kind of think that it is a little bit easier and more forgiving to have a gutter because and a margin, because then if things aren't lined up perfectly, you won't see like the white gap in between your work. Since you are a beginner, it's more forgiving of a pixel mistake. And we can change the color of the background, which is cool. So here we are, we're set up with our grid. So remember, on the left hand side we have all of our tools, on the right hand side we have all of our panels. If I'm ever using a panel or a window, that you don't have, you can go to Window and then choose the panel that I'm talking about, and it will pop up for you. And then for this project, and then at the property, you have a property panel at the top too, and the property panel changes depending on what tool you have selected. So that's just the basic layout of Photoshop, and really the only things we're going to use today are the selection tool and the move tool and the layers panel. So that's really all we're focusing on. Maybe at the end we're going to use the paint bucket tool, which may be living under the gradient tool if you click and hold on it. A lot of the tools have more tools underneath. So we may use the eyedropper tool and the gradient tool at the end, but for right now we're just using the move tool and the rectangular marquee tool. So let's bring in an image. The easiest way to bring in an image is via copying and pasting from like Google image search. So that's where I'm going to start. So I searched for Camp Ellis, Maine, which is where I used to vacation as a little kid, and we're just going to make a little mood board about that. And I also filtered under tools for Creative Commons licenses, so credit to these respective um, authors of these images. So if we click on one, we can right click and choose copy image. We can right click on the space on the actual image over here. Sometimes if you copy from these thumbnails, they come out small still when you paste them in. And we are looking for images that are bigger than if each of these is 3 inches wide. Each of these little sections is 3 inches wide, and there's 300 pixels per inch. We're looking for things that are bigger than 900 by 900 pixels. So this should be bigger when we right click on it and choose copy. And then we can choose Command or Control V or Edit Paste. And yes, it is plenty large. So then we can trim this down. So with the Move tool, we can kind of move it and it should snap to the grid lines that you already have out. If it's not, you go to View, Snap. You can check that off and make sure that when you hover over Snap to, Guides is also checked off, so that helps things snap. And then with my Move tool, we have Show Transform Controls checked in the Properties panel. Remember, the options up there change depending on the tool you have selected. So with Show Transform Controls checked, we're always in free transform mode, so we can scale down these to any size, and then we can just select what we don't want to include and delete it. I'm going to do that with the rectangular marquee tool, which is like a rectangular selection tool. So we can click and drag and select the regions we don't want to delete. I like to start outside and end outside of what I'm selecting, because if you do snap to the grid lines like this, you can sometimes leave behind stray sections of like 1 or 2 pixels. So start outside and end outside, and that will eliminate any of those pixels. And then I'm just going to make sure that this is the layer that I have selected, and we can choose delete. So every image that I bring in is going to be on its own layer, so you do have to do some layer management in this. Photoshop doesn't automatically deselect. We need to go to Select, Deselect, or hit Command or Control D. There we go. There is image number 1. Now, I have assembled all of my other images into this example 3x3 project. I assembled these from images that I took myself, and then also from websites like Pexels and Unsplash. So credit to Raul Dario and Nicole Settle and Tyler Moulton. And actually this one, does it say who took this? Well, credit to whoever took that. So for images that you have assembled in a file, I find the easiest way personally to get them into Photoshop is to drag them in. So one at a time, we can drag them in there, and then you must hit enter to kind of tell it that you want it in there permanently. Otherwise it has this X through it and some functions are limited. So we can hit enter, and then we can switch back to the Move tool and move these around and try to get them in place. So this is actually a Whistler painting that I just thought looked really good. I love Whistler. Thought it kind of fit the vibe. I don't know. And then for these images that are dragged in from a file, the other option besides dragging them in is to go to File, Place Linked, and find the image. There we go. And then you can scale it first and then hit enter if you like. These are linked to files in your documents. So sort of files on your computer. So they are not editable in the same way that these that this image was instantaneously. So if we try to select a region and delete it of any of these, also make sure we're on the right layer, we will get an error message. So even though that's the right layer, it says we could not complete your request because the smart object is not directly editable. So in order to edit things that are linked to a file, it's easiest to rasterize them. So we can right click and choose rasterize layer and then hit delete. As you gain more skills in Photoshop, there are reasons to include embedded files. They're more durable in a way, but they for beginners, I think we just want to be able to edit the pixels. So we can select, if you select a region you want to delete on this and we hit delete, it gives us a error message because this is a smart object and we have to right click the layer, not the thumbnail, but the layer, and choose rasterize layer. And then when we hit delete, we would be able to. So I wanted to point out for this painting, even though I delete along here where, and this looks all set now, if I were to try to rearrange this image, we would find that there are some pixels. Sorry, I have to deselect first. Select, deselect. There are some images, there are some pixels left over that were off the page. That's no big deal if we're just going to leave it there, but that's something to watch out for. You can only select and delete images that are on the page. If I wanted to fix that, I could just slide it into frame and select around it, around the region I don't want anymore. Start outside and end outside, ideally. And hit delete. Make sure we have the layer selected. And hit delete. Delete on my keyboard. And then I'm just doing Control D or Select Deselect to get rid of that again. So in this case, I am, for variety, doing one picture that takes up 2 frames. So let's bring some more pictures in there. You can bring in more than one at once. So if we click and drag those in there, it seems like I have an extra, but that's okay. We can just hit enter to apply the placement of all of them. And then all of these are smart objects because they're all linked to files on my computer. So I'm going to rasterize all of these as well. So we'll just rasterize them right away. Rasterize. And then I'll shut them off and deal with them one at a time. So this one, really you shouldn't scale up after you've rasterized, but for time's sake I shall. So that's the pier at Camp Ellis. For something like this, let's say we want this one to actually be in the center and we want to delete everything but the center. We can select what we want to keep and then go to select inverse and it'll select everything else. So you can see now that the marching ants are not only around the center, but they are also around the outside. So everything but the center is selected. And when we hit delete, it removes that. So then I'm deselecting. So then we can just go through and do that for each image. We can scale them down to size, adjust their placements, and then select what we want to keep in this case, and then go to select inverse and hit delete. And then deselect. I have auto select on, so all I have to do is click on the next image, and it automatically scales it. So we can scale that down and select what we want to keep, go to select inverse, and then hit delete. And deselect, Control D, or select deselect. Yeah, what do we have left? Oh, that one we've already put in there. And then we have the cormorant. So we can select this image, scale it down to the size that we want, select what we want to keep, and go to select inverse or Control Shift and I all at the same time, and then hit delete. One more, select the image, scale it down to the size that you like, and select what you want to keep, select inverse, and hit delete. Excellent. So if you needed to at this point, you could rearrange any of these to your heart content. Some of them, like this one, you would have to adjust if there were pictures you wanted to. You would have to like get rid of that. For example, if you wanted to move this to a center one and you wanted it to be on a top layer, but you may be able to eliminate some of that stuff with adjusting the layers. All right, what do we think? What do we think? Something like that. Anyway, let's change the background color. So we can do that with the paint bucket tool, which hides under the gradient tool. So if you click and hold on the gradient tool and then slide over to the paint bucket tool, that allows us to fill, we make sure we're on the background layer, it will fill the whole background layer with whatever color. So right now my color is just black, so it filled it with black. Then we can go to swatches or wherever and pick another color. Or if you want to pick a color from your document, you can use the eyedropper tool to pick out a color and then switch back to the paint bucket tool. Or if you hold Alt while you're using the paint bucket tool or the paintbrush tool, then you can pick out a color while you're using that tool, and you can kind of toggle to the eyedropper tool when you hold that button. So that's another option as well. I actually like that like rich blue though. So that looks good. And then to save, I would go to File, Save. We want to save both the .psd file and the .jpg file if we are going to submit it to our e-learning website, or if you're going to post it to Instagram or whatever, you would also want the .jpeg. So we can go to File, Save, and this is where we're going to save the actual Photoshop file. So this is automatically prompting me to save it to the cloud, which would be fine. If you want to, though, you can save it to your computer, and we could call it, main 3x3. And this is the we'll change it to the PSD because I don't think it needs to be a large document format. I'm not sure why mine automatically switched to that. So .psd is good in this case, and this is the editable file. So this will, you could open it up again, it would look exactly like this with all your layers there and all that information preserved. So main 3x3 in this case, and I'm going to choose save and hit OK. And then if this got closed, we could double click that file and it would open up again exactly the same. So the other thing we want to save for submission or for posting is the JPEG file. But you can see if we go to File, Save As, there's no JPEG there. There's only Photoshop or TIFF, and, sometimes there's PDF. There's PDF there, but all of those are really large files that don't work well for submission and are also just really hard to manage. All of those preserve layers too, which makes things really big. So we just want to flatten the image, and the easiest way to do that is to go to File, Export, Export As. So hover over Export and then choose Export As, and then we can change the format to JPEG. And if you want to, you can slide the quality slider all the way to the right. The width and height should be, that's 9 times 300, so 9 inches at 300 pixels per inch. And then we can choose export, and then it will ask us where we want to save it. This export as function does have a file size limit. So if you're working on something as big as a poster, there's another process for saving JPEGs. But you can ask me about that later if you want, just as an aside. And we can choose export, and then we can save it wherever we like, and choose save. And then that JPEG would open up not necessarily in Photoshop, but yeah, it's opening up in the PC version of preview photos. So there is our mini mood board about my summers at Maine. And so that is what we would then submit to the assignment on, while Mass Art is now on Canvas. So, all right, I will talk to you guys later, and I had a great time explaining this to you. Bye.